The glass counter at Gold Rush Pawns was cold under my knuckles. I was just there to get a watch battery, I swear. But then I saw her hands, my daughter Clara's hands, trembling as they slid that platinum band with the Montana sapphire across the smudged glass. A single tear fell from her face, hitting the surface right next to the engraving I knew was there. Forever our mountains. My own breath stopped. That ring, her husband Ben, saved for 2 years to have it made. It wasn't just jewelry. It was their promise. And she was pawning it. The pawnbroker didn't even look at her face. He just picked up his loop, indifferent, already calculating the scrap weight of her heartbreak. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked out, a cold fury settling in my chest where my heart used to be. I knew exactly why she was doing it. Marlene, her mother-in-law, my nightmare. That woman had been a financial vampire since Ben passed, guilt-tripping Clara for support, bleeding her dry with family emergencies. But this was the final straw. I didn't go home. I went to my garage, fired up my laptop, and printed out every single inventory sheet from my old moving company days. Then I called up 2 of my guys, Tony and Leo. "We're taking a ride. Now." 20 minutes later, I was storming up the walkway to Clara's little bungalow, the 2 movers like a wall of muscle and moving pads behind me. Clara opened the door, her eyes red and wide. "Dad, what?" I held up the inventory sheets, my voice dangerously calm. "We're doing an eviction, sweetheart. Not yours, hers." I marched past her, straight to the guest room. Marlene was lounging in Clara's late husband's recliner, watching a shopping channel. She looked up with that smug, entitled smile. "Wyatt, to what do I—" "You have 1 hour," I said, slapping the inventory sheet onto the TV screen. "Everything that belongs to you in this house gets tagged, packed, and loaded into the truck outside. What's not on that truck in 60 minutes gets donated, your choice." I looked back at Clara, who was standing in the hallway, a hand over her mouth. I nodded to the pawn ticket I'd seen clutched in her hand at the shop. "Go get your ring back, Clara. I'm handling the trash." The coffee in my hand suddenly felt too heavy. I set the mug down on Clara's kitchen counter, the ceramic clinked too loud in the quiet. I'd driven into Bozeman just to see her, a simple visit. But now my old rancher's eyes were picking up details like tracks in fresh snow. Her smile was there, but it was thin, worn. And her eyes, they were the real tell. A faint, glassy redness, the kind you get from staring at a wall too long, trying not to blink. My gaze, almost of its own accord, dropped to her left hand, resting on the back of a dining chair. It was bare. My heart did a slow, cold roll in my chest. "Clara?" I started, my voice gravel. She followed my look, then quickly tucked her hand into the pocket of her jeans. "It's nothing, Dad, just allergies. The cottonwoods are awful this year." Her laugh was a short, dry sound that didn't reach those red-rimmed eyes. But I wasn't seeing her cozy living room anymore. I was back on a ridge overlooking our ranch, the summer air smelling of pine and warm earth. Clara in her simple white dress, the sunset painting the Absaroka Range in fire and amethyst behind her. My big, work-roughened hands, suddenly so clumsy, holding her slender finger. "This is for you, honey," I'd said, my voice thick. The band was cool platinum, but the stone was a piece of home, a Montana sapphire, the deep, clear blue of a twilight sky. one I'd panned from the creek on our own land years before, saving it for I didn't know what. Until I did. I slid it onto her finger, the fit perfect. The engraving inside the band caught the last of the sun. Forever our mountains. The memory was so vivid I could feel the mountain breeze. That sapphire wasn't just a jewel, it was a promise, a piece of our legacy, of every sunrise over those peaks and every hard-won mile of fence. I'd placed it on her finger as a shield, a reminder of where she came from, no matter where life took her. And now it was gone. She was brushing past me, talking about putting on a fresh pot, about a sale at the grocery store. Normal words, but the absence of that ring screamed louder than any confession. Someone or something had made my strong, beautiful daughter take off a piece of her own history. And as I stood there in her quiet kitchen, the ghost of a mountain sunset between us, I knew it wasn't in a jewelry box. It was a silent alarm, and every fatherly instinct I had was now wide, painfully awake. The engine of my old Ford was still ticking as I watched Clara's car disappear around the corner. My heart was a drum against my ribs. I'd followed her here on a gut feeling, a sick dread that had started the moment I noticed the hollow look in her eyes over breakfast. And now, seeing her walk into Gold Star Ponds, I knew. I stayed in my truck, the vinyl seat creaking under me. Through the grimy shop window I saw her, my daughter, my Clara. She wasn't browsing. She walked straight to the counter, her shoulders set in a way I recognized. That stubborn, heartbreaking resolve she gets when she's doing something she hates but feels she must. The man behind the glass, the pawnbroker, took the small velvet box she offered. He opened it, held a loupe to his eye, and the fluorescent light caught a flash of blue that sent a cold shock through me. The ring. She didn't haggle, she just nodded, took the cash he slid under the divider, and stuffed it into her purse without looking at it. She was out the door and back in her car before I could even move. I waited until her taillights vanished. Then I was out of the truck, the bell above the pawn shop door jangling like an alarm. The place smelled of dust and desperation. "Help you?" the pawnbroker asked, already putting the velvet box under the counter. "The ring, the sapphire ring the young woman just sold. I want to buy it back." He gave me a slow, appraising look. "Just took it in. Can't sell it back yet, regulations. But I could let you have it for a premium." "Name it," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. He shrugged, pulled the box back out, and opened it. There it was, Clara's platinum wedding ring, the Montana sapphire like a piece of captured sky, the engraving inside I knew by heart, "Forever our mountains." A promise her husband couldn't keep, a piece of her heart on a shelf next to old trumpets and power tools. He tapped a price into a calculator, spun it around. It was a fair price for the ring, but then he slid the pink receipt copy toward me. "Your girl's sale price," he said, almost apologetically. I looked at the number. It was less than a third of what he was charging me. A pittance. She'd been so desperate, so cornered by whatever pressure Marlene was applying, that she'd taken the first insulting offer. The air left my lungs. This wasn't just selling a ring. It was a cry for help she was too proud to voice. "I'll take it," I managed to say, pulling out my wallet. I paid the man, took the small, heavy box, and closed my fist around it. The cold metal bit into my palm. Marlene had done this. She'd backed my girl into a corner so tight that selling her most sacred memory felt like the only way out. As I walked back to my truck, The receipt crumpled in my pocket felt heavier than the ring. This was the proof. And the war had just begun. The kitchen smelled like the coffee Clara had just brewed, but the air felt thick, like a storm was about to break. I'd asked her one more time, my voice quiet but firm. "Clara, honey, where is your ring?" She'd been avoiding my eyes, twisting a dish towel in her hands. But when I gently placed her own platinum wedding band on the scrubbed pine table, the Montana sapphire catching the morning light, the "Forever Our Mountains" engraving facing up, something in her just shattered. A sob ripped from her throat, raw and painful. "It's Marlene," she choked out, the words tumbling over each other. She came over last week. She said if I wanted real family harmony, if I wanted her to stop making comments about my choices, my life, then I needed to contribute, to be a team player. I felt my jaw begin to tighten, my teeth grinding together. Contribute to what, Clara? Her new mink coat. The sentence hung in the air, obscene and ridiculous. My daughter, my brilliant, kind-hearted daughter, was being blackmailed for a fur coat. She showed me the picture. She said it was the least I could do, since her son had given me such a beautiful life. Clara's tears were flowing freely now. "The ring? Dad?" It was the only thing of value I had left that was just mine. She said it would be a symbol. My commitment to the family. My gaze drifted from Clara's heartbroken face. There, on the kitchen counter, next to a bowl of fake fruit, was a glossy luxury catalog. It was open to a marked page. Even from here I could see the sleek, smug model draped in a full-length mink. Marlene's catalog. She'd left her shopping list at the scene of the crime. I didn't move. I just let the cold, hard fury settle in my bones. This wasn't about a coat. This was about possession, about Marlene trying to take something sacred, a symbol of my daughter's love and promise, and turn it into a trimming for her own vanity. I reached out and covered Clara's hand with mine, the one that should have been wearing that ring. "Look at me," I said, my voice low but steady. "You don't buy harmony. And you never, ever pay a ransom with your heart." The ring on the table between us wasn't just jewelry anymore. It had become a battle line, and I finally knew exactly where the enemy was standing. All right, so I'm in my truck, heading back from downtown, and my hands are gripping the wheel a little too tight. The heater's on full blast, but I still feel cold. For weeks, it's just been this gut feeling about Marlene, this knot in my stomach every time I thought about Clara's money just vanishing. But today I started turning feelings into facts. My first stop was the county clerk's office. Smelled like old paper and lemon cleaner. I asked for the property records on Marlene's house, the big showy place she's always bragging about maintaining. The clerk, a nice woman with glasses on a chain, pulled it up, and there it was, in black and white, the deed. The house isn't in Marlene's name at all. It's in Clara's and her husband's. My sweet, generous Clara owns that house, and her mother has been living there rent-free for years, acting like the queen of a castle she doesn't even own. With Clara's permission, and I made sure she understood every step, I went to the bank next. Got itemized statements for the joint account Clara sometimes lets her mom access for emergencies. There were no emergencies, just a long, sickening list of automated transfers. Gift to Marlene. $500, $1,000, $750, like clockwork. A gift isn't a monthly subscription, Marlene. But the thing that made my blood go from simmer to a full boil was my last stop. The Furrier, downtown. Fancy place, quiet as a library. I showed the manager a photo of Marlene from Clara's social media, her in that new ridiculous mink coat she'd been flaunting at Christmas. Paid in full, she'd told everyone, with a wave of her hand. The manager checked his books. He remembered the deposit. It was paid from an account under Clara's name. Clara, who shops for jeans on sale and drives a 10-year-old sedan. Clara, who's been saving for years to replace her simple platinum wedding ring with the Montana sapphire, the one engraved, "Forever Our Mountains." I walked out of that Furrier, and the cold air hit me like a slap. This wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a paper trail, a trail of my daughter's kindness, her trust, being turned into mink coats and mortgage-free living for a woman who sees her not as a daughter, but a bank. I got in my truck and just sat for a minute. The evidence is right here, on the passenger seat. A stack of papers that feels heavier than stone. Marlene isn't just difficult. She's a thief. And I have the proof. I was bringing up a load of laundry when I saw the suitcase open on her bed. My heart just stopped. "Clara?" She didn't look up, just kept folding a sweater with a frightening robotic precision. "Marlene says I'm ungrateful," she said, her voice flat and hollow. She said, "If I can't support family, then I don't deserve to be part of one. That I should leave." The sweater in her hands was the one she'd worn to her own wedding rehearsal. I watched her place it in the suitcase, right on top. And something inside me, something that had been bending for years, finally snapped. It wasn't a loud break. It was a cold, silent hardening, like steel setting. This wasn't about a forgotten coat anymore. It wasn't even about the ring, though the thought of that platinum band with its Montana sapphire, that "Forever Our Mountains" promise being locked away in Marlene's drawer made my blood simmer. No, this was about control, total, absolute control. Marlene wasn't just stealing an heirloom. She was systematically stripping my daughter of everything. Her confidence, her joy, her sense of belonging. She was trying to erase Clara's own history and replace it with a narrative where she was the perpetual debtor, the forever guest in her own life. And now, she was manipulating her into exile. I stepped into the room, the laundry basket still in my hands. "Look at me, honey." Clara finally paused, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. She looked exhausted, a 24-year-old worn down to the bone by a war of whispered criticisms and conditional love. "You are not ungrateful," I said, my voice lower and steadier than I felt. "You are this family's heart. This is your home. That ring on your finger, the one she took, it's yours. It's the proof of where you come from and the life you're building. She doesn't get to hold it hostage, and she sure as hell doesn't get to tell you when you've worn out your welcome in the house your own grandfather built." I set the basket down. The decision was there, fully formed. It wasn't a spark of anger. It was a glacier, massive and immovable. I was done negotiating, done trying to keep a peace that only required my daughter's surrender. "Stop packing," I said, gently taking the next blouse from her hands. "You're not going anywhere." The clarity was brutal and perfect. This ended now. Not with a shouting match, but with a reclaiming. I was getting that ring back. I was drawing a line, and for the first time I knew without a single doubt that I was ready to defend it. I sat across from the lawyer's polished mahogany desk, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. The final move. "Mr. Henderson, thank you for seeing me on such short notice," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. I opened the folder I'd brought, the one I'd been compiling in secret for weeks. This concerns my daughter, Clara, and her assets. I slid the first document across the desk. The deed to the house, the one I'd helped with the down payment for, clearly in Clara and her husband's names. Next, I presented the bank statements showing the transfers from my account and her husband's for the mortgage payments. Then came the photos, dozens of them, of Clara in her home, with her things, living a life Marlene was trying to erase. The lawyer, a man in his 50s with calm, assessing eyes, took his time. He adjusted his glasses, poring over each page. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the soft rustle of paper. "The villain here," I said, the word feeling strange and dramatic but utterly true, "is my mother-in-law, Marlene. Since Clara's passing, she's claimed the house and everything in it as her own. She's been living there, locking out Clara's husband, essentially trying to rewrite history." I saved the most important piece for last. From my inner jacket pocket, I withdrew a small velvet box. I opened it, revealing Clara's platinum wedding ring, the Montana sapphire catching the office light. "This was never in the house. I have it for safekeeping. But it's proof. It's engraved." I pointed to the tiny script inside the band. "Forever, our mountains." Everything in that house was a gift with love to Clara, not to Marlene. The lawyer leaned back, steepling his fingers. He looked from the ring to the documents and gave a single firm nod. "You're correct, Wyatt. This is very clear. The house and all its contents are the sole property of Clara's estate, which passes to her husband. Marlene has no legal claim, not by deed, not by gift, not as next of kin. She is a guest who has overstayed her welcome, nothing more." The relief was so potent it made my head swim. "So I can remove her?" "You can," he confirmed. "Given the circumstances, I'd advise hiring a professional moving and storage company. Have them inventory and box her personal effects for her to collect. For the rest, the home's actual contents, you are acting as the executor of your daughter's wishes. You have the right to secure the property." That was all I needed to hear. I shook his hand, a new sense of purpose solidifying in my chest. My next stop was a moving company. I didn't hire two guys with a truck. I hired a full crew from a reputable firm. I showed them the lawyer's letter authorizing the action. Then I handed over my own documents. Printed, detailed inventories I'd made from memory and old photos, with copies of receipts for the living room set, the refrigerator, the television, every major item Clara and her husband had ever unwrapped with joy. "This list," I told the foreman, tapping the paper, "is what stays. Anything not on this list gets boxed for the tenant. It's all documented. It's all legal." I walked out into the afternoon sun, the folder now empty of its evidence, but my hands finally full of the authority I needed. The trap was set. The law was on my side. Now, all that was left was the execution. The doorbell rang, and I could see Marlene's smug silhouette through the frosted glass. She thought I was here to apologize. She thought she'd won. I took a deep breath, my daughter Clara's hand a small, solid weight in mine. "Ready, kiddo?" I whispered. She nodded, her jaw set just like her mother's used to be. Behind us, the two movers shifted on their feet, and Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, gave me a steadying nod. I opened the door. Marlene stood there, a porcelain teacup in her hand, a sickly sweet smile plastered on her face. "Wyatt, and you brought an entourage. How dramatic! Coming to finally see reason?" I didn't step inside. I let the chill from the autumn air rush past me into her perfectly heated foyer. "No, Marlene. I'm here to return something." Her eyes flickered with greedy curiosity. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the small velvet box. Her smile widened, thinking it was a peace offering. I snapped it open. There it was. Clara's platinum wedding ring, the Montana sapphire catching the gray daylight, the inscription, "Forever our mountains," just visible. "You wanted value?" I said, my voice eerily calm. "Here." I placed the box in her outstretched hand. She looked at the ring, confusion momentarily replacing her smugness. Then I handed her the second item, a thick bound inventory from Mr. Henderson. "And here's the value of everything else you've been enjoying. The furniture, the art, the silverware, the lease on this house." I let the words hang. "None of it is yours." The color drained from her face. She fumbled with the pages, her eyes scanning line after line of itemized belongings, all legally documented as mine or Clara's inheritance from her mother. "This is... You can't..." "I can." I nodded to the movers behind me. "Load it up. Start with the dining set and the paintings in the living room." As the two men brushed past her, their boots heavy on her pristine floors, Marlene seemed to shrink. She was just a woman, holding a ring she could never understand the value of, standing in a house that was never her home. The teacup rattled in its saucer. Clara squeezed my hand tighter, not with fear, but with a fierce, proud strength. We didn't say another word. We just watched as the moving began, the sound of wrapping paper and careful footsteps filling the space where her manipulation used to live. It was the quietest, most satisfying victory I'd ever known. The sound of ripping Velcro and heavy boots on hardwood was my symphony of justice. I stood on the front lawn of the house I'd built, Clara's small hand tucked firmly in mine, and watched the final act unfold. The movers I'd hired were artists of efficiency, methodical and cold. They weren't just taking furniture, they were performing an exorcism. "That's mine! You can't take that!" Marlene's shriek cut through the autumn air from the open front door. She was a wasp darting between the uniformed men, trying to sting, but they were armored in paperwork. I didn't move. My lawyer, a calm man in a gray suit, stood beside me, a leather-bound folder in his hands. Every item the movers carried out, the gaudy porcelain figurines, the heavy velvet drapes she'd installed to darken the place, even the expensive light bulbs from the fixtures, was checked against our meticulously prepared inventory. "Item 147, living room curtains, original to the property," the lead mover stated, his voice monotone. The lawyer gave a single, silent nod. Clara squeezed my hand. On her thumb, she nervously spun her own ring, the platinum band with its deep Montana sapphire catching the weak sunlight. Forever our mountains. This was for those mountains. For us. Marlene finally erupted from the house, her face a mask of purple rage, and zeroed in on me. "You monster! I'll have you arrested. I'm calling the sheriff." She fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking. "Please do," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. "Save me the trouble." The sheriff's cruiser rolled up the gravel drive 10 minutes later. Marlene descended on him like a harpy, spitting accusations of theft, vandalism, trespass. The sheriff, an older man who'd known my father, listened patiently. Then he walked over to my lawyer, who handed him the folder. He spent a long time reading, the deed in my name, the eviction notice, the civil court order permitting the reclamation of chattel. He closed the folder and handed it back. Turning to Marlene, his face was all polite, professional finality. "Ma'am, this is a civil matter. All the paperwork is in order. The property owner is within his rights to reclaim his assets." He tipped his hat to me. "Wyatt." The last truck door slammed shut. The movers drove away. The lawyer shook my hand and left. The sheriff gave Marlene one last, pitying look and drove off. And then there was silence. The three of us on the lawn. Marlene stood on the porch, staring into the gaping maw of her former home. Through the open door you could see straight through to the back windows, nothing but empty, echoing rooms, bare floors, and the ghostly outlines where her things had been. The house I built was just a shell again, waiting to be filled with better memories. All the fight seemed to drain out of her, leaving behind a hollow old woman. I knelt down to Clara's level. "Ready to go home?" I whispered. She looked from the empty house to me, and for the first time in months, her smile reached her eyes. "Yeah, Dad." I didn't look back as we walked to the truck. The echo of that empty house belonged to Marlene now. We were finally free of it. The sunlight streaming through Clara's new apartment windows felt different. Clean. A month had passed, and the space was now filled with the familiar furniture and art we'd carefully reclaimed, each piece a little victory. But the brightest thing in the room was the smile on my daughter's face as she moved a vase to a side table, the light catching her hand. On her finger, right where it belonged, was her platinum wedding ring. The Montana sapphire glowed a deep, peaceful blue, and I knew if I looked close enough, I'd see the engraving. Forever Our Mountains. Her husband, Sam, put a hand on her shoulder, and she leaned into him. That simple moment, the quiet support, the lack of tension, was everything I'd fought for. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Seeing the lawyer's name on the screen, I stepped into the kitchen for some privacy. "Wyatt." His calm, professional voice came through. "I have an update. It's done. Marlene has officially relocated out of state. She's moved in with a cousin. The sale of the house is final, and all ties here are severed." I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. "Thank you for everything." "My pleasure. Enjoy the peace. You've earned it." I ended the call and just stood there in my daughter's bright, quiet kitchen. The toxic presence that had loomed over our family like a permanent, bitter storm cloud was simply gone. She'd packed her bitterness and left. No fanfare, no last-minute drama, just a retreat to a distant state, far from us. Walking back into the living room, Clara was showing Sam a photo album she'd just unpacked. She laughed at something, the sound light and free. I didn't interrupt. I just watched, my heart full in a way that was almost unfamiliar in its simplicity. On the bookshelf, a framed picture caught my eye. It was a recent photo of Clara, taken right here in this apartment. She was smiling, her eyes crinkled at the corners, no shadow in her gaze, happy and free. I looked from her real living face to the captured one in the frame, and the final thought settled over me with absolute certainty. It was over. Some mountains you climb, others you just remove. The end.